Think about for a moment, what do you talk to other people about? You don't need to say anything, just think about that. Do a little mental check in your mind. What is it that you talk to people about? According to psychology today, there's really a top 3 things that people talk to others about. And they are this. Number one, it's shared interest or the current events that are taking place around the world. That's one of the main things that when you just start engaging in a conversation, you begin to talk about shared interests. And in fact, you may have saw out someone this morning right here in church that had a shared interest. Or maybe you came right in and talked about a current event. Secondly, it's personal experiences and emotions that people share. And then it's thirdly, work and daily life challenges people talk about. So as we talk about the best of, we're going to look at the best of our witness this morning. The best of our witness, thinking about what is it that we talk to others about. Because a witness is someone who shares their experiences of what they've seen and what they've heard, and then they talk to other people about it. So for instance, some of you last night watched the Syracuse football game, experienced that, and now we're talking to other people today of the outcome. You witnessed something, and now you're speaking to other people about it. We're going to see a story in the Bible from Mark. But again, we kicked it off last week with, "For this is how God loved the world. He gave his one and only Son so that everyone who believes in him will not perish but have eternal life." Last week, we broke down the idea of what does this one and only Son actually mean from the Scriptures. We brought the depth to it, and we came to the conclusion that there is no comparison to Christ. Usually in the idea of one of a kind, you're basing it off a comparison. But there's no comparison to Christ. It is God's best. And again, what is our response because of that? We're going to see a story in Mark chapter 5. If you have a Bible, you can turn with me there. If not, it'll be behind me on the screen. And we're going to see a story where you may know this story, or maybe if you haven't been around church, you may have heard a piece of this story. But we're going to look at a part of this story that typically isn't highlighted as much, which will help us figure out in our lives what does it look like to give the best of our witness. In this story in Mark chapter 5, Jesus crosses a lake, Sea of Galilee, and we're picking up over on right there. He's crossing. That's all you got to know. He's in the boat. He's crossing. It says, so when they arrived, Jesus and his disciples at the other side of the lake in the region of the Gerasenes, when Jesus climbed out of the boat, a man possessed by an evil spirit came out from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the burial caves and could no longer be restrained, even with a chain. Whenever he was put into chains and shackles, as often as he snapped the chains from his wrists and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Day and night he wandered among the burial caves and in the hills, howling and cutting himself with sharp stones. Give yourself that visual image here of the plight of this man that Jesus meets right as he gets off the boat. Think about that. A man who howls at the moon, cuts himself with sharp stones, and just wanders because of the brokenness. And obviously we see here being possessed by a demon. When Jesus was still some distance away, the man saw him and he ran to meet him. He bowed low before him, and with a shriek he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" That wasn't the man, that was actually the demon speaking out of him. "In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had already said to the spirit, "Come out of the man, you evil spirit." So in this moment, we see this engagement, and the part of this story that we often know is in this moment, Jesus casts this demon out of this man, and he sends this spirit into a herd of pigs that are nearby, and all these pigs run off the side of a hill and into the water and drown. And we see this picture that in this moment, this man is set free from this demon that was possessing him, set free from his hurt, set free from his brokenness, sent into a herd of pigs. And I guess it made news People heard all about it. The shepherds or the pig farmers were probably upset that they lost their whole herd. And it says, a crowd soon gathered around Jesus, and they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons, which means many, thousands. He was sitting there fully clothed and perfectly sane, which we see here. It means this man was wandering these hills and caves, naked, cutting himself, howling, but now he's perfectly sane. They were all afraid. Then those who had seen what happened told the others about the demon-possessed man and the pigs. And the crowd began pleading with Jesus to go away and leave them alone. Think about that. Don't you think you'd be like, hey, I got this problem. Come and do this for me. Like, no, it blew their worldview, blew their mind, and they're like, no, this is no, you got to leave Jesus. As Jesus was getting into the boat, because Jesus is a gentleman, where Jesus is not wanted, he'll not stay. He's a gentleman. As the man was getting back into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. So if we're thinking clearly, we know that often in the scriptures, Jesus looks at people and says, hey, you, come follow me. You, hey, come follow me. Or there's other parts of the scripture where people say, hey, I want to follow you, Jesus, and he challenges things in their life that might get in the way of them following him. Like he says, birds have a nest and foxes have a den, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. So for those of you like me who don't like camping outside, you probably wouldn't like to follow Jesus because he just found a place to lay his head each night as he ministered to other people. So in the natural world, you have to think, man, Jesus, this Jesus has a story of this man that he can bring on tour with him and say, hey, Jesus is like, hey, listen, I got a story for you. And this man who doesn't have a name would get up and say, you'll never believe this. I used to be like this. Then I met Jesus one day when he got off the boat. And Jesus did this to me. And now I'm perfectly sane. I'm set free. My life is transformed. I'm changed. You would think that's a home run, right? This is part of the text that we often look over, I believe. This is what Jesus says to the man. Nope. Sorry. Okay, I messed it up. Here we go. But Jesus said this in verse 19. No, go home to your family and tell them everything the Lord has done for you and how merciful he's been. Think about that. He says, nope, you got to go home to your family and tell everybody what I've done for you. That's powerful. He says, you're not getting in the boat with me. You're going to go back home. Let's think about this for a moment. Why is it harder to go home than to go with Jesus? Let's throw that out there together. Rejection, right? You get home, and they're like, right? Reject the guy, sure. Why else? Home knows you, right? They could just say, dude, you're lying to us. We saw you do this. We saw you do that. Yeah. Why else? Embarrassment, right? You don't want to own up to what you've done. You want to tell people, yeah, I'm sorry that one time I went running through the streets. Obviously, we know he wasn't fully clothed. Yelling. Sorry about that time, guys. It's easier to go with Jesus because people don't need to know that part. They don't know that part of the story. That's why it's often harder to go home. I remember one time I was in Planet Fitness, and I was in the locker room, and I walk in, and a guy I knew from the past, and I'm just standing there, and he looks up to me. This is his first words to me. He goes, "So, how'd you become a pastor?" You know, it's like kind of like that thing. Like, I knew you before. Like, how'd that happen? Like, yeah, I just fell right into it. Just woke up one day and just fell right into it, you know. And so you had an opportunity to share with that. But again, sometimes it's harder to go home than it is to go with Jesus. It's harder to be where you're at every single day than it is to maybe go to a new place for a fresh start. But this is what Jesus wants. He wants us to be able to tell our Jesus story. Jesus tells the man this: tell them everything the Lord has done for you and how merciful he's been. This is what he tells the man. He's not like, hey, bud, I want you to go home and start a Bible school. And I want you to get all these texts. I want you to start all these Bible studies. I want you to start all these groups. He says, no, I want you just to go home and tell them everything the Lord has done for you and how merciful I've been. Think for yourself. What has Jesus done for you in your life? Think about that. What has Jesus done for you? Now let's back it up. What are reasons we don't share our faith? Let's throw that one out there again. Why don't we share our faith with other people? Okay, think people don't want to hear it. Sure, yeah. Lack of confidence, right? Yeah. Where's some other ones? Rejection? Sure. Afraid they'll ask questions? Sure. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Yeah, right? Right? Yeah, they'll be like, what are you talking about? One of the ones I hear people say all the time, they'll say, I don't know enough. Here's the amazing thing of what Jesus tells this guy. Tell other people what I did for you. So if they ask questions, you could say, I might not know that, but I know this. We often think in Christianity, it's like, oh, well, if they ask me a question, I'm just going to pull out my dictionary I have and just start. No. Where we start is telling other people, what has Christ done for you? That's where you have to really pull back and say, what has he done for me? This is the personal story now where I enter into. That's where we talk about the idea of confidence. If someone argues with their own story, they're the crazy one, not you. It's your story. It's something that Christ has done for you. I know several people here at church, they'll literally go to people at work and they'll say, I see you have this going on. All I know is I tried Jesus. It worked for me. It might work for you too. It's as simple as that. And sometimes when people see who you were before and then they see you changed, you're able to say, this is what happened to me. This is what happened to me. Where we oftentimes think like, you know what? If I just get all these verses to someone, I'm just going to put all these verses out. I'm just going to give them 17 verses, and they're going to read them. Okay? It's not bad, but Jesus gives a very simple, effective method for sharing your faith. He says this: go home to your family and tell everything the Lord has done for you and how merciful he has been. Think about that. Let's take a quick break in this story as we reflect on this season of life, the Christmas story. There's a similar thing that happens in the Christmas story. The shepherds get this message in Luke chapter 2 from the angels talking about this Messiah being born. It says they hurried to the village and found Mary and Joseph, and there was a baby lying in the manger. After seeing him, the shepherds told everyone what had happened. They weren't like, hey, we saw this, you know what? Here's the book of John. It says they told everyone what had happened and what the angel had said to them about this child. They were witnesses to what they experienced. All who heard the shepherds' stories were astonished. Think about that. They were amazed when they heard the shepherd's story, because it was a first-hand witness of what was happening. So what does this man do? He could be like, you know what? It's easier to go back in the caves than it is to go back home. Or, all right, you got a different direction for me to go than going home? It says in verse 20, so the man started off to visit the 10 towns of that region and began to proclaim the great things Jesus had done for him. Proclaim the great things Jesus had done for him. And everyone, just like we just saw in the Christmas story, everyone was amazed at what he had told them. Think about that. Everybody was amazed. Now, when you read the scriptures, maybe, again, we have to look at things often that bounce out or key things. There's a region called the 10 towns, and you can see behind me, this is where Jesus crosses this sea right here. He comes over here, and he meets the man in this area right here. And this is known as the 10 towns right here, these 10 towns. And these 10 towns were really kind of like, they're kind of, if you think about like a modern day NATO, they all helped each other out. If one got attacked, they all would go to war against the other place that attacked them. And they really worked together like a league of small communities together. And at this point in Jesus' ministry, he had never been into this region of the 10 towns. Down here we see Jerusalem, Bethlehem, where Jesus was born, where, obviously where we see the focus of much ministry. But now we're up here in this region. It's also known as the Decapolis, which means the region of the 10 towns. It's important as we hold on to that for later in the story. And so again, we see the man starts off, and it says he began to proclaim. And so when I read that word proclaim, I ask myself, what does that mean to proclaim something? Because that's what we're asking to do. He's asking that man to proclaim his story to other people. So the word proclaim means to be a herald or act as a public crier. So what would happen is, in that time and place, a king would send somebody into a community with a message on his behalf. And when he came into that community, people would stop and they would listen to what that person had to say, because oftentimes it could affect their lives. It might mean a new law was coming into place, and they would stop and they would listen to what he had to say. When you walked in, this was like a dignitary on behalf of the king. And that's what he asked this man to do. Go and act as a dignitary on my behalf to proclaim what I've done for you. Vance Havner says this: the gospel is not a secret to be hoarded, but a story to be heralded in our lives. And so Jesus says, go to your family. So it starts in your family, but then it also needs to be proclaimed in your community. We have to come back and ask ourselves, though, what is it that you talk about to other people? What do you talk to other people about? Because as we look at this Christmas season, Jesus is asking for us to give the best of our witness, which means this. We love to talk about a lot of things that we are a part of, that we see, that we do. The best of our witness means we need to make space in our lives to talk to other people about Jesus and what he's done for us. Trust me, I get it. Right? I'm in this role, and sometimes I get into a conversation and I'm like, should I pull out a Bible verse? It's like, or I could just say, I don't know a lot of stuff, but here's what I do know. Jesus did this for me. He did this. And I get it. Trust me, I'm not the type. I build relationships with people. I think it's good to talk to people about things that you have in common with them, to build bridges and build friendships. Trust me, I think that's important. But when we say the best of, we need to have room in our lives to talk to other people about Jesus. And when they ask questions, take advantage of them. For instance, I had someone this week ask me, hey, how'd the job fair start? So I was able to share a part of the gospel of how they started, of what that meant. We need to have room in our lives for the best of what we talk about to do that. So again, we have to ask the question, what is it that you talk about? I did some mental check notes in my own life, and what is it I talk about, right? I love talking about sports. For instance, when Duke beat Arizona a couple weeks ago, 69-55, I'm texting my brother about that. I'm talking to other people about that. I'm also talking to people when they lost to Kansas the other day, how upset I was. I talk about that. One of the things I talk about. And oftentimes that's the first thing I might talk to somebody about. Or one of the things that we love to talk about. We love this one. We love talking about the weather. We love it. Right? Some people might know you more as the weatherman than your Jesus story. And again, trust me, I get it. I'm not asking you or suggesting that every time you walk into some situation, you start randomly talking about it. We need to create space in our lives for it. Or in the other modern day world that we live in of social media, of TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram and Facebook, or however you connect, email, what are you sending out into the interwebs? And how does that connect to your Jesus story in any ways? Or possibly, are you contradicting your Jesus story by what you share and what you put out there? The best of our witness. Why does it matter? Well, this story gives us a reason why it matters. If you have an actual paper Bible, you might have to flip it a couple pages. And if you have a Bible on a tablet or a phone, you can hit over to Mark chapter 7. There's some ministry that takes place in between Mark chapter 5 in this story and Mark chapter 7. Jesus, in Mark chapter 7, verse 31, it says, Jesus left Tyre and went up to Sidon before going back to the Sea of Galilee in the region of the 10 towns. A deaf man with a speech impediment was brought to him, and the people begged Jesus to lay hands on the man to heal him. Okay, listen to this. This region of the 10 towns are connected. They would all have probably heard this story in some way, especially because they told Jesus to leave. This man goes to the region of the 10 towns, tells everybody about what he's done for them. This is the first time Bible scholars say that this is the time that Jesus comes to the 10 towns for the first time. What this man's story told them was, hey, we need this in our lives too. We have this deaf man. If you could do this for this man, you can surely do something for this man. And it says now they begged Jesus to lay hands on him rather than leave. They begged him. So in this story, it's one of the more odder stories. Jesus sticks his finger in the man's ear. Don't suggest that for anybody when you tell your Jesus story. Don't go stick your finger in somebody's ear. But Jesus sticks his finger in the man's ear. He's healed. People are astonished. And it says Jesus told the crowd not to tell anyone, but the more he told them not to, the more they spread the news. They were completely amazed and said again and again, everything he does is wonderful. He even makes the deaf hear and give speech to those who cannot speak. So again, the key words are important. It says that he even does this, which means we already heard this story. So we know he sets people free that are possessed by demons. He transforms their lives. And even more, he puts his fingers in people's ears and they can hear. Because this man went and prepared the way for Jesus to come to the region of the 10 towns. This man was a forerunner. And so when we witness to other people, we have no idea what Jesus is doing in that person's life. We think we live in this little vacuum of like, well, if I say something, it's only going to be me. I have found in my life, there's been moments where I've been able to be right there in the moment when someone comes to faith in Christ, and I was like the 15th person put in that person's life that God was doing something. And I just got to see that part. And then there's other times where I hear the story 3 years later of someone who I was able to have a conversation with, and they come to faith in Christ, and God used me in the beginning part of their story because he was doing something in their life. And oftentimes, if you feel a prompting in your spirit to share your Jesus story, it's because Jesus is already doing something in that person's life, and he wants to use you to partner with him to reach that person. We think it's all dependent upon us, or we think if they reject us, it's all over with. That's a prideful way of looking at it. We need to walk in humility and say, Lord, however you want to use me, please do so. But imagine this guy's life. He goes from being shackled up in chains to proclaiming the transformation that he has. He doesn't tell this man, as we're going to go through the series in the new year, hey, why don't you just go through the Romans road with this person? Not saying it's a bad thing. He doesn't say to start there. He doesn't say, hey, why don't you go start an academy for all these Bible schools? Why don't you start a church? He says, no, just go home. And as you meet people, tell them what I've done for you. So this week, here's what we're asking. Number one, it's to give the best of your witness. What I mean by that is there should be time in our lives that we're able to share what it says behind me, our Jesus story with other people. You might even start with, yeah, there's a lot about the Bible I don't understand, but this is what I do know, that Jesus is real. This is who I was. This is what he did for me, and this is who I am now. And it might not be the whole thing. It might be in pieces. It might be one sentence you get in there. That's okay. And it's not going to happen to every single person you meet. I get that. But I guarantee you there's opportunities you have in your life to share that story with other people. And we often talk ourselves out of it. We often think, what if they ask a question? You can say, I don't know, but I know someone who does. Right? It's okay. Or sometimes we might even second guess ourselves. What did Jesus do for me? But we should be able to have that somewhere in our heart to say, this is who I was. This is what I know. This is what I've experienced. This is the witness that I've had. I've witnessed this. And sometimes your Jesus story is an ongoing thing. Hey, there's a guy at church, I saw this happen to him. I want that to happen for you too. Or hey, I got to get you connected with this person. They're just like you, and they had this happen to them. Sharing that. But if you're like me, you can get in the trap of talking about current issues, things you like, shared interests, work and life daily challenges, and other things we enjoy, or other emotional things that we have going on, our day-to-day struggles. But are you going to find time to do that? So again, it's giving the best of your witness. How are you going to find time or room in your life to share your Jesus story? And then secondly, this week, say, Lord, give me one opportunity to do this. Brave enough to do that? I guarantee you, if you ask for it, it's going to come. Say, Lord, give me one opportunity. And here's the deal. You might say, I don't know what I'm doing. But how you do it is you just do it. And you get better as you go along. And as you practice, it becomes more of a normal part of your conversation. But again, we often sometimes live like these double lives as Christians. We talk about a bunch of things, and then we'll sprinkle a little bit of stuff in there. But again, it's about finding the best of our conversations we have with other people to talk about. It's going to catch you this week. You're going to walk in someplace. Did you see this? And you're going to be like, man, I'm more excited about that. I'm more excited when Duke wins than sharing my Jesus story with other people. For those who are serving at the job fair this week, there's going to be hundreds of people that walk in our building from the community, and there might be one person that you have the opportunity to share your Jesus story with. It's an awesome opportunity. So as we consider this Christmas season and Christ being the best of what God had in a gift for us, one of the areas we need to give our best in is the witness we give back to other people. What are you witnessing about? You might be witnessing more about the snow this winter than you are Jesus. But the best of it is going to have room in our lives to share our Jesus story. And I invite you, if you say, I'm not sure what that is for me, to take a next step and ask Jesus to change your life. Because he will. Just like this man, he wants to transform, set free, and change your life. So you can say, I used to be like this, but I met Jesus, and now my life is like this. Are you going to give him the best of your witness?